WorkTrip. The man's hands were shaking as he fumbled for his phone, desperate to find some source of light in the darkness that surrounded him. He had never felt so alone and scared in his life. He was returning home from a long work trip, and as he drove home, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The horrors he had witnessed and experienced on his trip had left a deep and lasting impression on him. And now, as he drove through the dark and deserted road, he couldn't help but reflect on all that had happened. At first, he tried to push the thoughts away, but they only became more persistent, invading his mind and filling him with a growing sense of dread. He was barely able to keep his grip on the steering wheel as he drove, his mind consumed by images of death and destruction. The trip had been a grueling one, taking him to the most dangerous and remote parts of the world. He had seen things that no one should have ever seen, things that had left their mark on him in ways he could never have imagined. And then, suddenly, the car started to shake, and he heard strange noises coming from the engine. The headlights flickered and then went out, leaving him in complete darkness. Panic set in as he tried to start the car, but it wouldn't budge. He was stranded, alone in the middle of nowhere, with no way of contacting anyone for help. As he sat there in the darkness, his mind began to play tricks on him. He thought he heard whispers in the wind and footsteps approaching from all directions. He was sure that he wasn't alone, that something was out there watching him, waiting to pounce. He tried to calm himself down, but it was of no use. The memories of the horrors he had seen on this trip came flooding back, filling him with an overwhelming sense of fear and despair. He couldn't take it anymore. He needed to get out of the car and find help, no matter what was out there. Gathering all his courage, he stepped out into the darkness. But as soon as he did, he realized that his fears were not unfounded. Something was out there, lurking in the shadows, and it was coming for him. He turned to run, but it was too late. A hand reached out from the darkness, grabbing him and pulling him into the void. He screamed as he was consumed by the darkness, his last thoughts filled with regret for not listening to the warnings he had received. But just as suddenly as it had started, it was over. He found himself back in his car, the engine purring smoothly as the headlights shining bright. He was bewildered and disoriented, but he didn't care. He just wanted to get home to put this nightmare behind him. But as he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. The road seemed to twist and turn, leading him deeper into the darkness, and the horrors he had experienced on this trip were never far from his mind. And then he saw it. A figure standing by the side of the road, beckoning him to stop. He knew he should have kept driving, but he couldn't help himself. He pulled over, and as he got out of the car, he realized that he was face to face with the thing he had seen on this trip, the thing that had haunted his dreams ever since. The figure was tall and thin, with long, bony fingers, and a face that was pale and gaunt. Its eyes were black and empty, reflecting nothing but the abyss. The man was rooted to the spot, unable to move as the figure slowly approached him. But then, with a sudden twist, the figure changed. It became a person he had once known, a friend who had disappeared on one of these work trips, never to be seen again. The man was shocked, unable to process what he was seeing. "It's me," the figure said. "I've been following you, trying to warn you of the dangers you face. You have to leave this place, turn back, and never come back." The man was confused. He didn't understand what was happening. But before he could ask any questions, the figure disappeared, leaving him alone once again in the dark. He was filled with a sense of foreboding as he got back into the car and started to drive. The road ahead seemed to twist and turn, leading him deeper into the darkness once again. And the horrors he had experienced on this trip were never far from his mind, as always. But as he drove this time, he noticed that the road was leading him back to the place where he had first encountered the figure, the place where the horrors had started. And then he realized that the horrors were not just in his mind. They were all around him, closing in, and there was no escape. He screamed as the car spun out of control, the darkness closing in, and he was consumed by the horrors that he had left behind. He was never seen again, and it is said that his ghost still haunts the road, warning travelers to turn back before it's too late. In the end, the man learned that sometimes the horrors you leave behind can come back to haunt you, and that you could never truly escape the demons of your past.